The kitchen that never closed. I learned to wake before dawn the year my husband died. Not from grief, though. Grief was there. Heavy as winter quilts, but from necessity. The restaurant opened at 6, and bread needed baking by 5. And somewhere between those hours, I had to convince myself to keep going. My kitchen smelled like yesterday's baking. It always did. Flour dust settled into corners no amount of sweeping could reach. The scent clung to my hair, my clothes, my children's blankets. Thomas had installed the stove 3 years before the accident. Cast iron, temperamental, needing coaxing on cold mornings. I'd learned its moods the way you learn a difficult person with patience I didn't feel, but practiced anyway. The restaurant was 6 tables, mismatched chairs I'd collected over 3 years. Mr. Kowalski sat at the corner booth every Tuesday, had done since we opened. The window table stuck when you pulled it out. Nobody wanted that one. These details mattered. They were my world, small and knowable. I'd been a widow 2 years. The word still felt foreign in my mouth. Widow. Like something that happened to other women. Older women. Women who knew how to be alone. Thomas and I had run this place on love, not sense. Neither of us had business minds. We'd had generous hearts instead, which turned out to be a poor substitute for arithmetic. The children arrived at 3:30 each afternoon. Tommy first. Always. Thin wrists like winter branches. Too fragile for the work his father made him do. The Martinez sisters followed. Quiet girls who did homework in the corner booth. Sharing one pencil between them. I never charged them. Couldn't. Their faces reminded me of my own children's faces before I fed them supper. That hollow look hunger gives. Young eyes. How could I watch them go hungry when I had soup in my pot I made them stew? Simple food. Potatoes, carrots, whatever meat I could afford that week. Sometimes no meat at all. Just beans and hope. I toasted day-old bread with butter, watched it sizzle golden in the pan. The smell filled my small dining room. The children ate like eating was prayer. "Thank you, Mrs. Davies." Tommy always said, "Polite boy." Too polite for 8 years old. Politeness learned from scarcity. "You're welcome." I never knew what else to say. Late at night, I counted coins. The ledger showed more red than black. Had for months. 3 weeks behind on rent now. The numbers wouldn't add up no matter how many times I calculated them. I'd stopped trying to make them balance. Just acknowledged they didn't. The way you acknowledge weather, you can't change. I charged regular customers barely enough to cover ingredients. Mrs. Chen paid for her lunch. Mr. Kowalski left coins for his Tuesday soup. But I couldn't bring myself to charge what food was actually worth. Couldn't watch people's faces fall when I named a price they couldn't afford. When did I stop tasting the food I cooked? Everything was sustenance now. Nothing was pleasure. I made meals the way I made conversation going through motions, hitting necessary notes, feeling nothing underneath. Tommy's wrists reminded me of winter branches. Too thin, too fragile. How could I watch him go hungry when I had soup in my pot? The question repeated itself. Answer already decided before I asked. That night I counted coins again. Still not enough. Would never be enough at this rate. But I'd set extra potatoes aside for tomorrow's children anyway. Some mathematics were more important than money. I just didn't know yet what that choice would cost me. The ones who saw people started watching me differently around October. Not obviously frontier towns bred discretion, but I felt their eyes tracking me as I moved through my restaurant. Mrs. Chen lingered longer over coffee. Mr. Kowalski asked careful questions about my menu prices. "Seems low for good soup," he'd say, not quite looking at me. I manage fine. The lie came easy. I'd practiced it enough. They noticed. I hated that they noticed. Hated more that I needed them not to notice, which meant I was worse off than I'd admitted even to myself. James appeared in my restaurant 6 months after I'd stopped keeping track of time. Not appeared he'd been coming twice weekly for months, eating lunch at the middle table, paying exactly what I charged, leaving no tip because I'd made clear I didn't accept charity. But I started noticing him in October, which amounted to the same thing as appearing quiet man. Weathered hands that reminded me of my father's hands, competent, gentle, scarred from decades of work. His eyes saw too much. I recognized the look. Widower's eyes. Same as mine. Grief carved different faces on men than women, but the eyes were identical. One afternoon, he watched me give Tommy extra potatoes. I tried being discreet about it, but the boy's grateful smile gave me away. James's expression didn't change. He just watched. Saw me wave away Tommy's attempt to pay. Saw the way I squeezed the child's too thin shoulder. After the children left, James approached my counter. I was wiping tables, postponing the moment I'd have to count today's coins. "Ma'am," he said. "I've been thinking." I kept wiping. Dangerous habit. His mouth almost smiled. "Your back step's rotting through." I could fix it. I heard charity underneath the practical words. My pride flared hot and immediate. "I manage fine." "Didn't say you didn't." "Said the step's dangerous. Someone could get hurt. I don't have money for repairs." The admission tasted like metal. Like blood when you bite your cheek too hard. Wasn't asking for money. He shifted his weight. Uncomfortable. Men and their discomfort with directness. I could trade. Work for meals. I recognized the offer for what it was. Pity dressed up as exchange. I'd seen it enough times to know the difference, or thought I had. The step, genuinely, was rotting. I'd walked around the broken board so long I'd forgotten it was broken. Funny how you adapt to decay. "That's charity," I said flatly. "That's carpentry." His voice stayed even. "I eat here twice a week anyway. Might as well make myself useful." I wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him I didn't need his help or his pity or his twice-weekly presence in my restaurant, making me notice things I'd successfully ignored for months. Instead, I heard myself say, "You can start tomorrow." My voice was frost. Let him hear it. I didn't need saving. I just needed my step fixed. He nodded once. "Tomorrow, then." After he left, I stood at my counter staring at nothing. The step had been rotting 8 months. I'd mentioned it to Thomas once. Before, he'd said he'd fix it next week. Next week never came. Now a stranger was offering to do it for the price of soup I was practically giving away already. I told myself it was practical. Good business. Nothing more. I almost believed it. The paper that changed everything, the eviction notice, arrived on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were Mr. Kowalski's day, and I found the paper wedged in my door before dawn, before bread baking. Before I'd had time to convince myself today would be different from yesterday. 30 days to pay 3 months back rent or vacate the premises. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. I'd hoped they might, that reading them again would reveal some loophole, some mercy I'd missed. But legal documents don't traffic in mercy. They traffic in consequences. My hands shook, holding the paper. I folded it carefully, precisely, creasing the edges sharp enough to cut. Then I fed my children breakfast and pasted on a smile that felt like a mask, felt like lying, felt like all I had left. Mama. My daughter studied my face. 8 years old and too observant. "Are you sick?" "Just tired, sweetheart." Not a lie. Exhaustion was my constant companion now. "Eat your eggs." That day, I cooked without tasting. Served without seeing. Smiled without meaning. Panic churned underneath every ordinary motion. Mrs. Chen noticed something wrong. I saw it in her face, but frontier politeness kept her from asking. I was grateful. I had no answers to give. The children arrived at 3:30. Tommy first, Martinez sisters behind. For one terrible moment, I considered turning them away. Saving money, buying myself more time. Their trusting faces broke me. I made them stew. Extra potatoes for Tommy because his wrists were too thin. Toasted bread with butter for the Martinez girls because they loved it. Asked for it shyly every time. Fed them the way I'd fed them every day for 6 months. Knowing each bowl made my situation worse. Unable to stop myself, failure tasted like metal, like blood in your mouth after biting your cheek too hard. I'd been tasting it for months. Now it had a deadline. James came for lunch. He saw my red eyes, my trembling hands. I tried hiding it, but his too observant eyes caught everything. "What happened?" he asked directly. No frontier politeness from him. I considered lying, considered the cost of truth. Then exhaustion stripped pretense away, and I told him about the eviction notice. About 3 months back rent. About 30 days to solve the unsolvable. "Let me help," he said immediately. "No." The word came sharp. My pride, my independence, my fear of being pitied, all rising up in one syllable. "I don't need charity." Not charity. Help. There's a difference. Not to me. He was quiet a moment, then said, "I'll be here tomorrow to fix that step." Not asking permission, just stating fact. I wanted to tell him not to come. Wanted to refuse even this small thing. Wanted to maintain the fiction that I could handle everything alone. Instead, I watched him leave, then faced my empty restaurant and impossible choices. I could stop feeding the children, save money, survive longer. The thought appeared, and I hated myself for thinking it. Hated more that I couldn't make myself do it. Some mathematics were more important than money, even when money was survival. Even when survival was measured in 30 days, the quiet kindnesses. James fixed my step on Wednesday. I watched from the kitchen window, hands deep in bread dough, trying to look like I wasn't watching. His hands moved across wood the way my hands moved through flour confident, practiced. The muscle memory of decades. Something shifted in how I saw him. Not pity in his carpentry, just competence, quietness, presence, without demand. He didn't talk while he worked. I appreciated that. Men who talked while working usually wanted something praise, attention, acknowledgement of their generosity. James just fixed the step, tested his weight on the new boards, packed his tools, and came inside for lunch. "It's solid now," he said, sitting at his usual table. "Should last 10 years. 10 years. I almost laughed. I had 30 days, but I thanked him, brought him soup, charged him nothing. He didn't argue. Some exchanges existed outside money. Thursday, Mrs. Chen left extra coins under her plate. Just a few. Slipped there with averted eyes. I tried returning them when she came Friday. She refused. "My grandson eats well," she said. Wouldn't meet my gaze. "I pay for that?" I didn't understand. Her grandson didn't eat at my restaurant. Then I saw Tommy at the corner booth, thin wrists wrapped around a soup bowl, and understanding arrived cold and complete. She knew. She'd known for months. "I don't want charity," I said, voice tight. "Good. I don't give charity. I paid debts." She left before I could argue. Other customers started doing the same. Mr. Kowalski paid double for his Tuesday soup. Young Mrs. Fletcher left coins for coffee she hadn't ordered. The money appeared like magic, like mercy, like something I couldn't accept and couldn't refuse. Friday afternoon, 2 widows appeared at my door. Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Gutierrez, women I recognized from church but barely knew. They stood on my newly fixed step, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. "We heard you might need kitchen help," Mrs. Pearson said, not asking, stating. My instinct screamed refuse. Maintain control, stay independent. Keep the walls high that kept me safe from needing anyone. "I can't pay," I said instead, honesty arriving where pride should have been. "Don't want paying." Mrs. Gutierrez spoke quietly, accented English, careful and clear. "We want to trade. We cook. You feed our families. Fair exchange." I stared at them. They were offering dignity, not accepting charity. The reversal stunned me. They needed help. Same as me, widows. Struggling same as me. And they'd found a way to ask for it that preserved everyone's pride. "You know how to cook, stupid question." "Every woman knew how to cook." Mrs. Pearson smiled. "Better than you. Probably. No offense." "None taken." I stepped aside. "Kitchen's through here." Working together changed everything. Mrs. Pearson kneaded bread different than me, harder. Faster. Producing lighter loaves I'd never managed. Mrs. Gutierrez seasoned soup with herbs I'd never considered, creating flavors that made customers ask for seconds. We developed rhythm without discussing it. They arrived at 2. We cooked until 6. Fed more children. Served more customers. Shared the work that had been slowly killing me. I'd forgotten what company felt like. Not customers eating at tables, but bodies moving together in shared purpose. The kitchen felt larger with 3 of us in it. Warmer. Mrs. Pearson hummed while she worked. Old hymns I half remembered from childhood. When had my kitchen last held music? We didn't talk much that first week. Just worked. But the silence was different than the silence I'd carried alone. Companionable. Comfortable. Like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. I caught myself setting out 3 coffee cups one morning before I realized what I was doing. Old habits returning, or new ones forming. I wasn't sure which scared me more. That night I counted coins again. Still not enough. But the kitchen had held laughter that afternoon, Mrs. Gutierrez's laugh. Sudden and bright over some joke I'd already forgotten. I wrote that in the margin of my ledger where I tracked debts. Profit of a different kind. 23 days until eviction, but my step was solid. My kitchen held music. Children were fed. Widows had purpose. Maybe some mathematics really were more important than money. I just hoped the landlord understood that kind of arithmetic. The day I broke, I collapsed on a Thursday, 2 weeks before the eviction deadline, mid-afternoon. I simply sat down at my kitchen table and couldn't stand back up. Not dramatic. Not crying or screaming or making scene. Just done. Body running on fumes, now completely empty. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stared at them like they belonged to someone else. Wondered when they'd gotten so thin. When had I stopped eating the food I cooked for others? When had I become the hungry child I'd been feeding? All along, Mrs. Pearson found me first. She took one look at my face and called Mrs. Gutierrez from the stove. They surrounded me not with pity, but with recognition. They'd been here. They knew this particular geography of exhaustion. "We've got dinner," Mrs. Pearson said firmly. "You rest." "I can't," I started. "You can..." Mrs. Gutierrez put a hand on my shoulder, heavy, warm, real. "You will." Something in their voices made me obey. I sat in the dining room instead of the kitchen for the first time in 2 years. Watched them work my stove, serve my customers. Feed the children who arrived at 3:30 expecting me and finding these women instead. The children didn't seem confused. They just ate their soup, did their homework, left the way they always did. I'd thought I was irreplaceable. Turned out I was just exhausted. James arrived at 5 for dinner, found me sitting when I should have been cooking. He stopped in the doorway. Taking in the scene, me collapsed, the widows running my kitchen, the visible evidence of my failure. He sat down across from me, didn't ask if I was all right, could see I wasn't. Instead, he just sat there, solid and quiet, until my breathing steadied. "I almost lost my carpentry business," he said finally, 3 years after Mary died. Couldn't work, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but survive. Man named Patterson helped me. Forced me to accept help I was too proud to ask for. I stared at my shaking hands. If I accept help, I'm admitting I failed. Failed Thomas. Failed our dream. Failed everything we built together. The words cracked something open in my chest. First time I'd said it aloud. First time I'd admitted the fear underneath all my pride and independence and determined refusal to need anyone. James was quiet a long moment, then said, "Or you're admitting you built something too big for one person to carry." The words settled into my bones like cold after fever breaks. Painful and necessary. Thomas and I were supposed to do this together. I whispered, "He's not here. I'm doing it wrong, failing at it. Can't make it work alone. So don't do it alone." Simple words, impossible suggestion. I'd been alone so long, I'd forgotten how to be anything else. Mrs. Pearson brought me soup. Homemade, from my kitchen, prepared by her hands. She set it down like it was the most natural thing in the world, me being served in my own restaurant. Mrs. Gutierrez brought bread. They sat down with me, ate together. Made me eat too. Crying felt like betrayal. Thomas had trusted me to keep this place running. What would he think? Seeing me collapsed at our table, unable to stand, accepting help from strangers, but James's hands were scarred from years of carpentry. I found myself staring at them, wondering what they'd built, what they'd broken, whether hands that had survived loss could teach mine to do the same. "You don't have to be strong all the time," Mrs. Pearson said gently. "Strong alone anyway. Strong together is different." I'd spent 2 years being strong alone. It had nearly killed me. That night, the widows locked up my restaurant. First time in 2 years, someone else had closed my doors, counted my register, turned off my lamps. I listened to them laughing as they worked, heard my children sleeping safe in the next room, and wondered if maybe failure and asking for help weren't the same thing after all. Maybe they were opposites. Maybe I'd had it backward all along. When the landlord came, the landlord arrived 1 week early. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, impatient and demanding. I was in the kitchen with the widows when he walked in, saw children eating free meals, heard me offer Mrs. Fletcher reduced price for breakfast she couldn't afford. His face went red. "What kind of business are you running here? A restaurant?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Same as always. This is charity, not a restaurant. Half these people aren't paying. Those children certainly aren't." He gestured at Tommy, at the Martinez sisters. They froze, soup spoons halfway to their mouths. "They're customers," I said. "They're freeloaders. And you're enabling them." He pulled out papers. "Your lease won't be renewed regardless of payment. I want a real business here. Someone who knows how to turn a profit." Everything crumbled. I'd known the eviction was coming, had been counting days, but hearing it stated so coldly, real business. Turn a profit made it real in a way numbers never had. Mrs. Pearson stepped forward. "She feeds 40 people a day. That's real business. Feeding people who don't pay isn't business. It's charity." He said charity like it was obscene. Then James stood. He'd been eating breakfast at his usual table, quiet as always. Now he stood, and his quietness became something else. Presence, weight. "This woman has kept this neighborhood fed for 2 years," he said, voice level, eyes hard. "Real business." Other customers stood. Mrs. Chen, loud and clear. "This woman has fed my grandson for 6 months. She thinks I don't know. I know." Her eyes met mine across the room. "I've been paying what I can. Others, too. Mr. Kowalski. Best soup in 3 counties. Fair price. Honest work." The Martinez girl's mother. Woman I'd never spoken to. She feeds my daughters every day. Gives them safe place to do schoolwork. You know what that's worth. Parents I'd never met testified about children I'd fed without knowing their names. The widows explained the cooperative we'd accidentally built. Customers described what this place meant beyond food, the warmth, the safety, the community that had emerged from my small kitchen. I watched, stunned. My invisible work becoming visible. All those free meals, all that listening, all that care I'd given thinking nobody noticed. Suddenly everyone was seeing it, saying it, defending it. The landlord's face went from red to pale. He'd expected to evict one struggling widow. Instead, he faced entire neighborhood standing together. 1 month extension, he said finally, grudging. Partial rent now. Full payment in 30 days or you're out regardless. After he left, customers pooled money. Coins appeared on tables, under plates, pressed into my hands. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Kowalski, the Martinez girl's mother. James put down more than I'd earn in a month. I can't accept this," I said, voice shaking. "You're not accepting charity," Mrs. Pearson said firmly. "You're accepting payment for 2 years of feeding people who couldn't pay. We're just settling accounts." I'd spent 2 years working invisible, feeding children nobody thanked me for feeding. Now suddenly everyone was speaking, and I couldn't find my voice to answer. Mrs. Chen told the landlord, "This woman has fed my grandson for 6 months. She thinks I don't know. I know." Her eyes had met mine across the room. I'd thought I was being discreet. I'd been being seen all along. The money they pooled, I counted it 3 times. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to survive a little longer. Enough to try. When had enough to try started feeling like hope, I took the money. My hands shook, holding it. Not from fear this time, from something else. Recognition, maybe, that I'd built something worth protecting. That protection could look like community instead of isolation. 28 days until final deadline. But I wasn't facing it alone anymore. The night I walked away, I drafted the closing notice late Wednesday night. The pooled money had bought time, not solution. I was still failing financially. Still couldn't make the numbers work. Maybe I should close, find regular work, stop this impossible dream before it destroyed me completely. The notice was simple. Closing permanently. Thank you for your patronage. Professional. Clean. A lie so complete, it almost looked like truth. I walked through my empty restaurant holding the paper, touched tables where children did homework, the stove Thomas installed, the corner booth where Mr. Kowalski sat every Tuesday, my restaurant, my husband's dream, my spectacular failure. Every doubt I'd suppressed for 2 years surfaced at once. Not enough. Not smart enough, bad at business, failing Thomas's memory, failing our children, failing everyone who'd believed in me, helped me, stood up for me. They'd pooled money to save something I couldn't sustain. What happened when that money ran out? When I failed again? When I proved everyone's faith in me was misplaced? I could see their faces when I posted the notice. The children's confusion. The widow's disappointment. James's quiet understanding that I'd given up. Better to quit now, before I wasted more of their money, their hope, their misplaced faith. I sat at the table where I'd collapsed weeks ago, held the closing notice in both hands. Such simple words to end everything. My husband used to say, "Beth, you cook like you're feeding someone's soul, not just their stomach." I'd laughed at him, called him sentimental, called him foolish. Now I wondered if he'd seen something I was only just beginning to understand. The children would find other places to eat. The widows would manage somehow. Everyone survives. But would they thrive? Would I? Or would we all just go back to being alone? And call that surviving. I remembered being hungry as a child. The hollow shame of it. How it felt to watch other children eat while your stomach cramped with emptiness. My mother had done her best, but some years her best wasn't enough. I remembered Thomas teaching me to knead bread, his large hands guiding mine, showing me how to fold the dough, how to feel when it was ready. His laugh in this kitchen, the way he'd sneak bites of whatever I was cooking, burn his mouth because he couldn't wait. Kiss me anyway, tasting of soup and bread and home. This kitchen held ghosts. Good ghosts. Warm ones. Memories that nourished something money couldn't measure. I thought about Mrs. Pearson humming hymns while she worked. Mrs. Gutierrez's sudden bright laugh. Tommy's careful thank you every single day. The Martinez sisters doing homework in companionable silence. James fixing my step without being asked. The community that had emerged from my small act of feeding hungry children. I'd been measuring success wrong. Profit and loss. Black and red. Numbers that either balanced or didn't. But what about the other arithmetic children fed? Widows given purpose. Community gathered. Loneliness transformed into companionship. Failure meant giving up on profit. Success meant creating space where love circulated like nourishment. I'd had the definitions backward all along. The question wasn't whether I could sustain this alone. The question was whether I'd accept that I didn't have to be alone. Whether I'd let this thing I'd accidentally built become something bigger than my individual struggle. The children would survive without me, but they were thriving with me. That difference mattered. I tore up the closing notice, stood in my dark restaurant, and made a different choice. Not to close. Not to continue as before. To transform what I'd built into something sustainable, even if I didn't yet know what that looked like. Thomas had dreamed of a successful restaurant. I'd thought success meant full tables, good reviews, profit margins. Maybe success meant something else entirely. Maybe it meant creating a place where nobody ate alone, where struggling people helped each other survive and maybe, if they were lucky, thrive. I didn't know if I could make this work, but I knew I had to try. Not alone this time. Together, community, cooperation, mathematics more important than money. Morning would come. I'd make a different choice then. Build something new from what I'd accidentally created. For now. I swept my restaurant floor, counted coins that still weren't enough, and felt something that might have been hope stirring underneath the exhaustion. The choice I made, I posted a different notice. Friday morning, community kitchen, all welcome to cook, eat. Contribute what you can. My hands didn't shake writing it. The decision had settled into my bones during the long night, becoming certainty where doubt had been. I wasn't giving up. I was transforming. There was a difference. I called a meeting for noon. Widows, James, regular customers, Mrs. Chen, Mr. Kowalski, the Martinez girl's mother. They came uncertain, probably expecting me to announce closure. Instead, they found tables pushed together, coffee brewing. Me standing at the head with something that felt dangerous. A plan. I've been running this wrong. I started, voice steady, clear, Trying to do it alone. Trying to be a regular business when what we've built is something else entirely. They listened. I saw James lean forward. Attention focused. I want to make it official. Formalize what's already happening. Cooperative kitchen, shared responsibilities. Those who can afford to pay extra subsidize those who can't. Those who can't pay money contribute time, skills, help. Children always eat free, that's foundation. Not negotiable. I'd spent weeks feeling powerless. Now, standing before these people, proposing this structure, I felt something else. Competent. Creative. Capable of building solutions instead of just enduring problems. We already have widows cooking, I continued. James doing repairs, customers paying what they can. We're already functioning this way. I just want to make it intentional, sustainable, something that can survive beyond my individual struggle. Mrs. Pearson spoke first. What do you need? Help formalizing it. Someone who knows bookkeeping, someone who can manage schedules, someone to negotiate with the landlord, because I'm terrible at negotiation. Admitting weakness felt like strength now. Strange reversal. I'll do books, Mr. Kowalski said. Kept ledgers 40 years as clerk. Can make sense of your finances. Mrs. Chen. I'll manage schedules. Who cooks when? Who serves when? Organization. James. Building repairs are my contribution. Been planning improvements anyway. Might as well make them official. Other voices joined. Skills I didn't know people had. Help I'd been too proud to ask for. Offered freely now that I'd finally opened my hands to receive it. When I said children always eat free, nobody questioned it. That was the foundation everything else built on. Not charity principle. The difference mattered. Charity implied superiority. Principle implied values. One condescended. The other elevated. We spent 2 hours working out details. Who would cook when? How we'd track contributions, both money and time. How we'd approach the landlord with our new structure. How we'd make this sustainable beyond one struggling widow's impossible dream. The landlord came at 3. I'd asked him to meet me. Said I had a proposal. He arrived skeptical, probably expecting begging. Instead, he found a room full of people and a business plan. Mr. Kowalski presented finances cleaned up, organized, showing clear path to sustainability. Mrs. Chen explained the schedule, the cooperative structure, how we'd function. James outlined planned improvements. I let them speak. My role was different now. Not doing everything alone, but coordinating people who each contributed their specific skills. Leadership looked different than I'd expected. Less like carrying everything yourself, more like helping everyone carry it together. The landlord listened, saw community investment, clear organization, path to stability. Saw opportunity for good publicity two-man, who supports community cooperation instead of evicting struggling. Widow. Reduced rent, I said when they finished. Voice firm. Not as favor, as partnership. You get good publicity, stable long-term tenant, known community asset. We get sustainable rent we can actually afford. Everybody wins. The negotiation took an hour. I was terrible at it, like I'd said, but Mr. Kowalski was excellent. Mrs. Chen knew exactly which pressures to apply. Together, we reached agreement-reduced rent for 1 year. Renewable if we met clear benchmarks. Partnership, not favor. Equals, not charity. The distinction mattered. James caught my eye across the room when we shook hands on the deal. He smiled, not proud of me like I was a child, but impressed like I was a peer. That smile felt like confirmation I was doing something right. After everyone left, I stood in my restaurant that was becoming something else. Community kitchen. Cooperative. Place where struggling people helped each other survive and maybe, if we were lucky, thrive. Not my restaurant anymore. Ours. built from my accidental generosity, transformed into intentional structure. I'd spent 2 years protecting what Thomas and I built, trying to preserve his dream exactly as he'd envisioned it. Now I was transforming it into something he'd never imagined, something bigger, something that might actually survive. Would he approve? I didn't know. But I thought maybe he would. He'd always said I cooked like I was feeding souls. Now I was building a place where souls could feed each other. We shook hands on it, all of us. Circle of agreement. My restaurant was becoming something else. Something bigger. Community kitchen? Cooperative? Place where struggling people could help each other survive and, maybe, if we were lucky, thrive. The numbers still didn't quite add up. They probably never would. Not in traditional sense. But we'd found different mathematics. Equations that balanced cooperation against isolation, community against individual struggle, love against profit. In that arithmetic, we were rich. The table we share 6 months later. My kitchen operated like clockwork. Mrs. Pearson took morning shift, Mrs. Gutierrez afternoons. I floated between them, teaching new recipes, learning theirs, supervising the cooperative we'd built from desperation and hope. Children still did homework at corner tables. Tommy's wrists weren't quite so thin anymore. The Martinez sisters had their own pencils now, bought with money their mother could afford after we'd fed her daughters 6 months free. Parents contributed what they could: money, time, ingredients, skills. The space had transformed into genuine community hub. James and I had grown closer, but carefully, gently. 2 people who understood loss, finding companionship in shared work and Sunday evening walks. We talked about our spouses without pain, now remembering them with warmth instead of grief. He made me laugh. I'd forgotten I could laugh like that. Forgotten laughter was healing. We weren't rushing anything. Building friendship first, letting anything else develop naturally. No rescue romance. Just 2 people who'd survived loss learning to build something new. Mrs. Thompson arrived in January. New widow. Husband dead 3 months. Struggling with business he'd left her. She reminded me of myself 2 years ago, exhausted, proud, determined to do everything alone, even as it killed her. I recognized that particular desperation. I'd worn it like armor. "Can you teach me to make bread?" she asked one afternoon. Voice shaking. Asking for help was clearly torture. Of course. I brought her into the kitchen, showed her my husband's recipe. Thomas had taught me to knead this dough. Now I was passing it forward. Mrs. Thompson's hands shook working the flour. Same way mine had shaken 2 years ago. I steadied them with my own. "It gets easier," I told her. Meant the bread. Meant everything else, too. The ledger showed black ink now. Not much. We weren't getting rich, but enough. Enough to pay reduced rent, feed children, keep lights on, pay the widows small stipends for their work. Enough to keep building this strange, beautiful thing we'd created together. I'd stopped measuring success in traditional terms. My restaurant would never make me wealthy. Would never be the profitable business the landlord originally wanted. But it was successful in ways that mattered more than money. 40 people ate here daily. Widows had purpose and income. Children had safe space and full stomachs. Community had gathering place where nobody ate alone, where struggling people helped each other survive, where poverty became purpose when shared. My husband had dreamed of a successful restaurant. I'd thought success meant profit, full tables, good reviews. I'd learned success meant something else entirely. It meant creating a place where love circulated like nourishment, where nobody ate alone, where people saw each other's struggles and responded with help instead of judgment. James and I took walks on Sunday evenings now. We talked about our spouses without the sharp edge of grief. He told me about Mary, her garden, her laugh. I told him about Thomas, his gentleness, his impractical generosity. We remembered them together, honoring what we'd lost while building what might come next. "You've built something remarkable," James said one evening, watching me lock up the kitchen. "We've built it," I corrected. "Together. That's the whole point." Mrs. Thompson pulled her first loaf from the oven in February golden. Perfect. Smelling like every good thing. She stared at it like she'd created magic. "You'll teach someone else someday," I told her, certain now. Pass it forward. She looked doubtful. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself, not long ago. "You will," I said firmly. "This is how it works. We learn, we teach, we build the table wide enough for everyone." The cooperative was expanding. 2 more widows had joined. A young mother who'd lost her husband to illness. An elderly woman whose children had moved east. We were creating something bigger than restaurant, bigger than business, bigger than my individual struggle. We were creating family, chosen family, built from necessity and generosity and the radical idea that struggling people helping each other was success worth measuring. I thought about the eviction notice sometimes, how close I'd come to giving up, how I'd almost closed these doors, walked away, returned to isolation, and called it surviving. I'd learned something essential in those dark months. Generosity isn't about giving until empty. It's about building a table wide enough for others to serve you too. Strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about accepting help so you can keep serving. Poverty isn't failure when it becomes foundation for something richer than money. My kitchen held ghosts still. Good ghosts. Thomas's laugh. His gentle hands teaching me to knead bread. But it held life too. Mrs. Pearson's hymns, Mrs. Gutierrez's bright laugh, children's voices doing homework, widows finding purpose, community gathering around shared tables. This was the life we built. Not the life Thomas and I planned, but something that grew from those roots. Something that honored his memory by expanding his generosity into sustainable structure. This was the table we shared. This was the success we'd created. 1 loaf, 1 meal, 1 person at a time. I locked the door that night, checked that all the lamps were out, touched the stove Thomas had installed with love that still warmed this space. Tomorrow I'd wake before dawn. Bake bread, open doors, feed children, work alongside widows who'd become sisters. Build community 1 meal at a time. The arithmetic still didn't balance in traditional sense. Probably never would, but we'd found different mathematics. Better ones. Equations that measured souls fed instead of profit margins. Community built instead of individual success. Love circulated instead of money accumulated. In that arithmetic, we were rich beyond measure.